cycles. So today we're going to be going over the basics of TIG welding. TIG welding stands for Tungsten Inert Gas. So the tungsten is your electrode. It is not a consumable electrode, which means it does not get burnt to go into your weld. MIG welding and stick welding, the electrode is consumed. With MIG welding, it's the wire, and with stick welding, it is the stick, I guess, or rod. And so tungsten's pretty amazing. It can handle, I've had all the way up to 250 amps on an 1/8 inch tungsten, and it doesn't melt down. So the next thing you need to know is the inert gas. Inert gas is basically argon or helium. Argon is used in 90% of everything that you'll do. And then the other 10% is special cases, certain stainless processes, aluminum processes. That's where helium and other more active gases would go in. So if you try to light up, you just bought a TIG welder, you have a bottle of 75-25, I don't think I have time to run to the store. Well, your problem is going to be is that you're going to destroy your tungsten and you're not going to get the desired effect. It has to be an inert gas. So the next step is getting familiar with your torch. So your torch here, this is a CK Worldwide CK9 Flex. It's what I prefer for doing what I do. I also prefer having the thumb mounted switch, simply for the fact that when I'm working on motorcycles or cars, I like to have it right on my torch so I don't have to drag a foot pedal around. So with your torch, this is the torch body, the handle, and the head, the flex head. This one flexes. So then I have other versions of these on the table here. So starting at the front, you have your gas cup. This is a number 7 Pyrex cup. This is a clear Furic BBW cup. This cup is great for stainless or places where you have to have large stick outs. Your stick out should be the diameter of your cup from inside to inside. So with this number 7, you can't stick it out nearly as far as this Furic BBW. Now moving backwards from that, we have our gas lens. I prefer to use the gas lens for everything that I do. It provides laminar flow, which is basically all the molecules inside of the gas get straightened out and flow towards your weld. And that cuts down on a lot of the turbulence you can have when you run a higher pressure of gas when you're welding. So this is just a regular gas lens, wire mesh here. And so this acts as your collet body. This is your collet here. Your collet has 2 slits in it, and when you tighten your torch down with your back cap, it all tightens against and pushes those shut and holds your tungsten tight. So that's all what's on the front of the torch. What's on the back of your torch is a back cap. They offer them in short, medium, and long, depending on the size of tungsten you're using and how much space you need. And also on the front side, depending on what you're using, you will need a different insulator that goes behind your cup. This isn't the right one for this. And then it goes where this white piece is right here. So now the next thing when you get into welding, TIG welding specifically, is your metal has to be clean. It has to be ground down to white metal. That means the mill scale has to be off of it. You can TIG weld over certain types of mill scale, but most of the time it results in a lower quality weld because the torch and the arc can't eat through the mill scale and you'll end up with undercut, which is not good. That's where failures can happen. So there are 3 different types of starts, arc starts in TIG welding. So the arc start is how the electricity gets the puddle started. Basically, this here has 2 options technically you can do all three with this machine, the Miller Dynasty 200. It has high frequency, which basically takes your wall output, turns it into high frequency, and that's how the arc can jump the gap to your piece and start the arc. The next is lift arc, where you'll touch your tungsten to your piece and lift off. That's the second best, in my opinion, for home and DIY. And then the last would be ran off of a regular stick welder, and that would be scratch start. And scratch start is basically like you're lighting a stick electrode. Touch down and drag it and start it, which destroys your tungsten sometimes if you're not very good at it, which thankfully I've had high frequencies and I haven't had a need to learn how to do it as much. So the uses of TIG, I think TIG welding is probably the best all-around type of TIG welding if you're going to buy one welder, because you can do very thin stuff at low amperages, 30 or less amps. You can do thick stuff. This machine will go to 200 amps. That'll do pretty thick aluminum. And then anything that's too thick, you can bevel it and get away with doing it with this machine. Motorsports, when you're TIG welding, once you know what you're looking for, you can see the puddle and you have a lot more control over the puddle because you're adding in your filler metal, which just comes in 3 foot sections here, bare. So you're going to want to Scotch-Brite these, and that's how you're adding it in. You can add more or less depending on the joint type and what you're doing. But the only problem is, the reason why TIG welding kind of gets pushed to the wayside is it's a manual process, 100% manual, so you have to feed the wire into your puddle as you're welding. So that causes lower weld inches per minute. And if you're doing production, you want high weld inches per minute because time is money when you're doing production. In the garage, it doesn't really matter. I would prefer to TIG weld everything. It's cleaner, less cleanup, makes a nicer quality weld, and I personally know that that weld's in there. Some of the problems with short circuit MIG, which is what a lot of guys will do in their shop, is that if you don't clean that mill scale off of there, you can have a really nice looking weld that will fail. With TIG welding, you get it clean, you get it nice, and you put a nice weld in there. The outside of your weld probably looks like the inside of your weld. So the next thing for the basics of TIG welding is your proper PPE. First off, safety glasses. They're very important. They protect your eye, and if you do accidentally flash yourself, they will save your eyes. So you won't get welder's flash. I personally have been welding for 3 years now, and always worn my safety glasses, and I have never gotten welder's flash. They have UV protection. I mean, obviously you can't stare at the weld, but they will protect your eyes from accidental flashes. Now the next thing is a nice thick pair of welding gloves. These are the Cayman Revolutions, which I really, really like. They give you good ductile feel with your hands, and they're pretty tight fitting. Now, when you're first starting out, it's going to be hard to feed the wire with thicker gloves. But the nice thing is that, especially with air-cooled torches, which is the torch that I showed you, and most home torches, they keep you welding longer because you don't have as much heat input into your hands. Obviously, in a perfect world, you don't want to have any heat input, but this torch gets pretty stinking hot when you're welding at a higher amperage, 100 plus, for a long time. So a nice thick pair. If you practice feeding the wire when you're sitting on the couch watching TV, or you're doing anything around the house, it will become second nature. And even with a thicker pair of gloves, which these are stick welding gloves, you will be fine. MIG welding gloves are a little bit too thick, in my opinion. So the next thing is a nice welder's cap. This one I bought online. I personally find that the headgear on my helmet will get in my hair and rip it out. And the nice thing is it keeps anything out of your hair. So I recommend having one of these. It just makes you look more professional, and it's very nice to have. The next piece of PPE is a good set of welding sleeves. I normally wear these, or a nice welding shirt. Black Stallion makes a very good shirt. A couple other companies make very nice shirts, and they're definitely nice to have. The last thing will be a nice welding helmet. You got to protect your eyes. This here is an Optrel E680. It's one of the better helmets that I've ever used. I really like it. The color is good. You can see the arc. The one thing I don't care for is the grinder button being on the outside, because I'll switch over to a face shield or just take it off to grind. That's my personal preference, and you're able to do whatever you'd like, but I don't like being able to bump it on the outside and not know and flash myself. And the nice thing about this is the color is very true to life. So you'll see extra things with this than you will with a Harbor Freight helmet. And I understand not everybody has the money to go out and buy a nice helmet starting out, but I definitely recommend, if you're spending the money on a nice TIG welder, even a budget-friendly TIG welder, I would recommend buying a nice helmet. It will probably outlive your welder if you take care of it. Change the lenses, keep batteries in it, don't drop it on the floor, and it will take care of you. I made a lot of money with my welding helmets, and I take care of them. I hope that was a good introduction to TIG welding. We're going to have a couple more videos in this series about TIG welding and how it applies to motorsports. Have a great day.